Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Pastor Eric Deepen, and across from me is Pastor Andy Littleton from Mission, and I'm from the Village, and we're in Tucson, Arizona, and it's stinking hot.
And more humid than it should be.
And
let's
we're
be honest.
in the studio, and we did a little meta narrative and talked of ourselves, and did a little clickbait, some Justin Timberlake, but really
Metamodernism, our churches.
Yeah.
Andy's sermon critique.
Yeah, we did a little Andy's sermon critique.
Yeah,
I was a little hard on him, but I also supported his sermons.
Believe me, I'm the hardest person on my sermons. Trust me.
Yeah. Do you listen to your sermons?
Every time.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
It's helpful. I'm like, wow, that was not good.
Yeah.
Or,
and
all right, good point, Eric.
And I usually critique them more than anyone ever could. Yeah. But I've committed to doing it because it's a way to grow.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
And I learn a lot just from my own preaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The great thing, we'll talk about it. I submitted a sermon critique. I was like, the other thing I didn't say is I was like, man, you missed so many other things you should have brought up.
Yeah. Well, guys, look, you're going to dive into two amateur pastor philosophers who know very little about modern, postmodern, and metamodern philosophy. But we were intrigued by a few podcasts and an article, and honestly, we realized we're knee-deep in metamodern world, and it means something in the way that we engage each other and the world and how we bring Jesus.
So if you don't know squat about it, you're kind of like us. And that's why you're listening.
And enjoy.
And
share us. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Which one are we talking about today?
Metamodern, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I texted over. We could go debate.
Go debate. Metamodern. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast.
No, did you watch the presidential debate?
Oh, no, not at all.
We should talk about the question we got and the various. So this presidential debate has already and will bring up new layers of what people are thinking about. It's different. There's a lot there.
You watched the debate?
Some of it, most of it, yeah.
I did not.
Yeah, I wasn't going to, honestly. I really wasn't. I even told some people I wasn't going to, and then Michaela, my wife, was kind of interested, and so I was like, yeah, all right. And then I got kind of hooked into the follow-up commentary, partially because I had the same response other people did, which was we've got two things going on this screen. One is there's dishonesty all around, not surprising, but the level of it is. And then the other was, and these were my words, I said, Joe Biden looks like he was embalmed for this, meaning like he just looked sickly. He didn't, and then he was. It was shocking, and that's what a lot of the commentary is like. He's not doing well. And now the follow-up commentary is, was this part of the plan? Or what's the new plan? Or will there be a new plan? All of those. And so that's a little different than the issues. It changes the issues, the speculation as to why this early debate occurred. And so we should get into that. And we did get a question regarding the abortion issue, which we had said that we would be coming back to, and that was a feature of the debate.
Wow.
So future episode.
Thank you for the wonderful text that somebody sent us.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of our conversation, which people don't know is going to be about this, maybe exceptionally philosophical. And so in the spirit of meta in between the philosophical, I'm going to be very meta here, and I would like to open up and talk about Justin Timberlake
obviously
getting a DUI.
Oh, wow. That's, yeah.
And how funny I think it is, because I mean, I don't think DUIs are funny, but I know lots of people who have gotten DUIs.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get them announced, and they don't talk about them at their job.
Was yours
his concert?
Was yours announced?
No, mine was not announced.
Okay.
I gave it to myself while running down the hallway. But
Yeah.
that's no. But my point being is that the micro, the constant observation of our heroes and then their downfall and how that becomes like a narrative that we all get wrapped up in, and then Justin has to talk about it at his concert, and tell thousands and thousands of people about it. It's just a weird thing. Now, when I say being meta, I'm fully aware of it's interesting to me and it's great clickbait. So here we go. I talked about it. I'm aware of the irony there. But I'm going to live into it. That's the story I've chosen. So here we go.
Wow. He's chosen a story. Okay. Well, a few weeks ago, Eric sent me an article that I'd seen come across my feed from the Gospel Coalition, good old Brett McCracken, probably one of my favorite authors over there, because he's always engaging cultural stuff in movies, which is really what I want to talk about all the time. And it had to do with metamodernism in film. And as I'm becoming a part of the church, Eric, I'm a Christian.
A part of the industrial complex.
Well, here's how you know I'm a Christian, is because the term metamodernism was coined in the 1970s, mid-1970s,
Yes.
and I'm just now coming around to being aware of it, which is what Christians do. We respond to things and get on trends about 20 to 30 years after they've already happened.
So you're ahead of me, because I'm like, we were talking about metamodernism in 1999.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think just as someone who has a small minute knowledge of postmodernism and has read at least probably a lot more than the average person,
of course,
but not as much as any philosopher,
right,
or amateur philosopher. I would argue that so far I haven't heard an accurate portrayal of postmodernism or metamodernism.
Yeah.
So anyway, but we'll have to. So I know this is like.
Here's my
like,
deal.
What the heck are
Here's my deal. The philosophy classes that I took were taught by people who were really more influenced by modernism, who were sort of freaking out about postmodernism, and they were quite behind. And so none of them brought up metamodernism or pseudo-modernism, for what it's worth, which was the other term that popped up in one of the articles I sent you.
So
so you and all the village listeners clearly being
they've never heard the word. We don't use it.
I was going to say they've been talking about this for 2 decades now, and
not
it's
the
just
word, but they have been participating.
Well,
in
we're
it
living
quite
out
clearly,
of it.
Yeah.
So definitions. That's probably.
I can give you 5 minutes. Give me 5, and then you can interact with me.
Yeah,
this
great.
is the easy way to do this.
Yeah, good. Let's go.
So modernism is the self. Like, so you look at the Reformation. You look at Martin Luther. Martin Luther looks at the church, and he says, "No, this is wrong." And he, as an individual, bangs on the door and transforms faith into the Protestant religion, where you personally, individually, can be justified by faith,
and we can break out of the shackles of the old and move toward a new future.
Right. And it's down to the individual. So you can then look at the American Revolution, Locke, all those guys. So that's if you want a movie, best movie is the very first Top Gun. Right? It's his gut. It's him. It's within him. It's the hero's journey. Blah, blah, blah. You want a sitcom, you're talking, I don't know, Huxtable's, what is that show? Where Bill Cosby, the Cosby Show. Yeah, the Cosby Show. That is modernism at its thing. If you were looking, then postmodernism is a critique of modernism, and it's a critique of all of that, and some good ways of thinking about it.
Well, modernism might say that it is the individual, but we can build things that can give us a better future, institutions included.
Right.
When people, individuals, work together for common goals, we can do anything. Postmodernism goes.
That's a critique. It's
and a lot of other things.
Yes. Yeah. And so just for pop culture's sake, good movies are Fight Club, because you see this. In the end, what are you left with? You know that you've been in postmodernism when you are, or in a postmodern media, when at the end you're like, what am I left with? What do I live into? Nihilism or nothing?
Right.
I think that Seinfeld is a great show in that it's about nothing, and the very last episode everyone hated because it was a postmodern critique, not of the show itself. It was actually a critique of the audience.
Yeah.
And how they should not have been so interested in a show that was about nothing.
Sure.
So it was a postmodern critique of the audience. So it's like, do you have that movie, other movies? I mean, there's a plethora of these movies within the 90s that kind of are in the postmodern. Metamodernism, which I would argue comes out of a branch of postmodernism, which comes out of Rorty, which is more about the story. Truth comes from your story and an awareness of other people's stories, but it's trying its best at this point to be in between modernism and postmodernism.
It's a both and. It's a middle.
Right. You know those little, what's those things, the little balls and they hit platoon.
Yeah.
What's that called? Whatever that is, that's kind of what metamodernism, you're trying to get the best of modernism without leaving the irony and cynicism of postmodernism. You kind of get the best of both, right?
It's an attempt to do that.
Self-awareness while having hope is what they're trying to do. So movies of recent, like Barbie, The Bodyguard, not The Bodyguard, that's a modern film.
Baywatch, I'm sure, is your show.
Yeah,
Where are you going with this?
No.
This is so metamodern.
I'm dying. Why did I say that? It's the what's the guys, the stunt guys? What's that show called? The Stuntman movie. I don't even remember the name of it.
The Stuntman movie. Yeah.
What is that movie? The recent one. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What's it
I
called?
don't know. I don't watch this stuff.
But it's the parent. Yeah, I watch it. It's very aware of it. It's self-aware.
Yeah.
So breaking the third wall.
And by breaking the third wall, this is like you might hear the narrator's voice in the middle of the film or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the thought process of the person becomes part of the experience as you,
right.
Or even the producer, like I mentioned, becomes a character
right in the movie itself. Yeah, and so I know that's a very short summary, and maybe the best way, if you're just like, well, I'm never going to dive deep into it, it's Top Gun, it's Fight Club, it's Barbie. These three movies distinctly define the three eras.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Since 1937, Child Evangelism Fellowship has reached over 378 million children worldwide. This kind of impact can only be possible through the work of the Lord using an effective, biblically sound ministry. On our podcast, Fellowship 17, we interview people affiliated with this organization and learn about its biblical foundations as well as examine topics and truths found in Scripture. Join us as we discover how God has used our various ministries to spread the gospel. Fellowship 17 is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the articles I sent you actually also popped pseudo-modernism in there, which was the idea of and the way they described it was modernism was the era of the book, and so we were going to gain all this knowledge and make progress. Postmodernism is the era of the television, which is where it's kind of like, what difference does it make? Just consume. It doesn't matter. Pseudo-modernism was the early era of the computer, which is like mindless, like let's just go somewhere where we can just get lost in mindless information and entertainment. Metamodernism is the new age of the computer where it's all clashing together, and it's and the experience is like, well, I'm going to cherry pick from the meaningful and the unmeaningful, from the I'm going to choose to engage in things that I'm going to treat as if they're true, whether they are or not. Yeah.
I mean, modernism is you personally can find and make truth, and it is real. It's reality.
Yeah.
Postmodern is there is no meaning or reality, and
metamodernism
maybe we can find it.
Is like, well, some things are. It's really hard to tell the difference, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Very middle, which
So
I relate to.
Why would we talk about this? Well, I think there's some movements that, like Jordan Peterson, and you may hear, if you move slightly above the pop conversation in life, you might be hearing things like meaning making, and
the meaning crisis.
And this is part of the metamodern conversation.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that like the Village was planted on was, yes, we live in a plurality of stories. So you have to be aware of the stories of other people.
Yeah.
You have to be aware, like you can't have a culture when it comes to your faith. Like there is a multiplicity of understandings of Jesus inside your Orthodox faith, and it's unique, and each one comes from a location. And so you have to be this awareness of your story, but also you can't be colonial and take your story and try to use it to the story of Jesus and use it to like subdue people, force them into something. You have to like actually trust your story.
And you have to allow other people's stories to have the potential of validity and to even shape you.
Yeah. Yes. And believe that if your story is a true story, and how we talk about truth is interesting, but then you trust the truth. You don't have to put your own power behind it. So these are things. This is very metamodern way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
And it's because it puts you in a very vulnerable position, but also a receptive position. So yeah,
So you're just a metamodern church.
Oh, very much so.
You've described the Village as the mega house church, but there's more to it. The
neo-monastic
mega
house church.
Yeah, so now we have to add the neo-monastic mega meta-modern house church.
Yeah, there you go. Wow.
No problem.
I'm going to just correct everything wherever that is and put it up on the...
Yeah. The nice thing about having like a really long L-shaped building is if you painted that on the wall, you could just wrap it all the way around to have the longest name ever.
Our neighbors would be like, oh, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So... Well, yeah. So that's you. I was thinking about back to me.
That was your story. That was nice.
That's not what I meant, but I love that it came out that way. I was thinking about it, and of course, these labels are of some value, right? But to some degree, it's a way of describing the times that we're in, whether you go about adopting this philosophy or not. You're probably sort of like this. So here was a way that as I was reflecting, I thought, okay, how would you experience my church as engaging in the metamodern conversation? And it hit me. So I submitted a couple of sermons to a denominational entity to get them assessed. And
that's brave.
Yeah, and the assessment was, not very good. They said, yeah, you've underwhelming, right, or something to that degree, which is great. So that's good for me to know. And here was the critique, and I found it interesting because I do want to listen to it. I do want to learn from it, but I also, it made me think about the audience I'm talking to versus the audience that this older professor is accustomed to. So the critique was that it wasn't simple to follow, and the professor wanted Reformed theology to permeate in such a way that I made all the language sound as if God is acting upon us. We are responding to God's action. God is the doer, not us. Now, theologically, I am checked off on the same confessions as him, and I believe these things. But so I went and listened to one of his sermons.
Did you send him a critique?
I didn't.
Oh, man.
This is it right now.
This is where I would do that.
I hated it. And here's why, because I was like, you're oversimplifying this stuff. You're it's so clearly passed through your theological lens. It's as if you aren't engaging the ambiguities that are present in it. Jesus doesn't talk like you. I'm when I'm reading the scriptures, when I'm reading the even Paul, he doesn't even talk like this. He'll sometimes talk and it feels like you need to take responsibility. And then in other places, it's as if God is the only actor, and those things are allowed to live in tension with one another, and you get to work it out. And I struggled with that it felt like it was a removal of those ambiguities and an oversimplification. That made me think part of why I teach the way I do, and there's a lot more, I often bring a lot more in and don't try to clean it all up, but I'm a very both and thinker. And then it hit me. I said, "Oh wow, that sounds kind of metamodern." It sounds like I'm shaped by those movements where I'm, I don't like that I have to pick. I don't like that when you talk about, are you driven by faith or science or something? I'm like, I don't want to have to pick one or the other.
Right. And that's a very modern question.
That's a very modern question.
It has to be either or.
That has to be either or, yeah. And I've never felt like I needed to pick. I have a lot of that going on in my life, I can see parts of my story that cue me up to think this way, right?
Sure.
But anyway, that's one thing that came up with me. How about you?
Well, can I ask a question on the critique? Was he saying that it wasn't simple in the sense of he wanted simple in the sense that he wanted this theological grid to be thrown over, and that was the thing that was going to simplify it?
I think there were two parts. I think number one, he has legitimate points for sure. Mm-hmm. I think the grid was part of it. I think that was a part. I think the other part was that he wanted there to be a very linear movement, like from this, it means, so therefore it means this, so therefore do this. And I walk away with takeaways. Mm. And I think I know how I can do that. I know how to do that. But I'll engage a text and I'll say, the text didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So am I supposed to make it do that? Or are we supposed to feel a thing when we're done reading it? Are we supposed to walk away and so, I mean, we're in a gospel, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Is hearing this parable or hearing about this healing supposed to give me a doctrine, or am I supposed to imagine what it would be like to encounter the Son of God? And I think the metamodern piece here, do we really have to pick one or the other? Or are they both happening at the same time?
That's a good question. I'll answer your question, and then maybe we'll talk about your sermon a little bit. So I think if we're going to just live in this metamodern kind of thing, I would say that more than anything, where it plays out in my life is how people talk. And so one of the things that makes me very uncomfortable is just when people are oblivious of other people's stories while telling their own story, and believing that their story and the things that they believe within their story are the right thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one of the classic metamodern things for me is that I mean, as a leader, I maybe stand differently, but as a person going to church, I can go to a church where people say, well, women can't be elders and women can't teach. I can go there. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted that women and men are honored within the congregation, cared for, and right? I can go there as long as it's not a place where we're just bashing women. Like
I know what you mean. Where somebody has a different point of view, but they're generally.
I can live under that. I can submit to it.
Yeah,
and I can agree that Scripture says it. Yeah. And I can go to church where there are women pastors and women elders, and I can live under it and submit to it. And that's where I, at some level, exist now. But. And I can say, it's very clear to me that it's in Scripture. Do I think one is more right than the other? Yeah, but I don't but I don't have to like live there. So some of that is like, it's relational. So here's my argument for your sermon. I don't think the way I've listened to you preach, I don't think the way, and you're maybe not like this, but I don't think the way you preach travels well. But I will argue, I don't think the way I preach travels well, because I don't preach to a large audience. I preach to a community that I'm deeply involved in. So 100%. My sermon is relational. I'm not preaching.
Right.
Yeah, I want always the text brings some form of doctrine.
Yeah.
It may be the subtext. Yeah. So I always want all of the elements. I want the gospel. I want all those things. But if you just drop in on one of my sermons, you're not going to hear all of the things you want, because it's a narrative.
Yeah.
It's a story. And I'm engaging the stories of the people in the community. So,
I actually, just briefly, I 100% agree with you. And that was one of my thoughts, was the hard thing about the whole engagement of having other people critique your sermon.
It's helpful.
It is. But the tough thing is, the unfortunate piece there is he's watching a sermon to a community he knows nothing about. And then I went and flipped it on him, and I watched a sermon of his to a community I know nothing about. Yeah.
So here's where my critique is someone who's further ahead and who actually is preaching at your church next Sunday. So I've begun to listen to your sermons.
Yeah.
Is that you guys are, I don't know, how old is between the two churches you've been around?
You can call it, we're either
10?
in our 11th or 16th year, depending.
Yeah, somewhere in there. But you sound a lot like like me and Rod at 11 to 16 years. Yeah. And I do think it evolves as the people evolve, so that your message when you go to another community is much more transferable. But church planters preach to their plant.
Yeah.
And in particular, the way you and I work, because you make labels, and it could come back on you, because the way I critique your church is that you guys say you're an outpost.
Yeah.
So I look at each thing and ask, is that an actual outpost? Yeah. Is it really an outpost, or is it and people come in darts. Oh, it's a mega house. Is it really a mega house church? Is it really neo-monastic?
Is it really mega? Is this really a house?
So the mega house church, actually, people land on really well. They're like, oh yeah, that's obvious, right? Because of the environment and the way it plays out. But the neo-monastic, is this really neo-monastic? What do you mean by monastic? Yeah. What is that? Where's the evidence of it that gets critiqued on the story label that we've created for ourselves? And so, yes, I think this is this is the difference in all of that. So... But I will argue that I don't agree with the guy critiquing you, because your last sermon, I mean, you do preach in the vein of, what's his name? I'm old, so you got to help me remember his name.
Oh, I don't even know.
You know, the guy up in New York who passed away. You
You must be talking about, let's see, what it rhymes with Timothy.
Oh, Timothy. Yes, thank you, Tim Keller. Yeah, in that you put your points up front. So I knew what you were going to talk about, and you gave me my applications. Right? You told me what they were in your one on tradition. Yeah, I mean, it's not like I couldn't figure out what I needed to apply.
Yeah.
And then you teased each point out.
Right.
It wasn't like, it was pretty standard form.
And I joked about, speaking of breaking the third wall, I joked about how unsurprising it was that there were three things I was going to tell you.
You did.
Yeah.
So I would argue with him that you don't have applications and movement forward, and you usually use the three ideas or the two ideas, right? This is sort of the model that you use for your sermons.
It ends up working a lot of the time. Every once in a while, and I don't usually announce it, but I actually apply Andy Stanley's pathway. On certain sermons, I actually really prefer the kind of me, we, God, we, you sort of thing. Yeah. Every once in a while I do it.
I use that one for beginning teachers because it's just an easy one to help them learn. Yeah. No, I mean, and if you come listen to one of my sermons, the standard openings are always going to be a very rhetorical, I want you caught in what I have to say. So I'm going to be very dramatic and very intense, and I'm going to say something where you're like, wait, what?
I like to build tension. Whether I do it effectively or not is up for debate, but I like to create a struggle or a sense of ambiguity, and then try to untangle some of it.
Yeah.
That's usually a sub goal of mine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, wow, we didn't know it was compelling conversation. But I do think as one of the things that is important to think about when you start thinking about like, okay, well, we are going through these movements, and these movements are part of what's shaping our children, shaping us and the way that we think. This place that we're in the metamodern world, where people are really looking for hope, because in response to postmodernism, you land in nothingness and nihilism. People are saying like, well, we have to find something that's hopeful, and so I think we have to be aware of that as followers of Jesus, because it's going to be in us. We're looking for hope, but it actually opens the door.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I think it's a great opportunity.
Much more substantial conversations with people without people saying, "Oh no, that's stupid," and Christianity is just done blah blah blah. You can just have a story that of the way God interacts with you, and the invitation for Him to interact with other people without it being, like, here are the 4 spiritual laws. You need to ascend belief-wise. There's a much more nuanced invitation to join your story, to have Jesus' story be part of theirs, like to listen to their experiences and understanding of spirituality.
Well, to understand what metamodernism, is describing can help if you realize that culturally, there are a lot of people who are not thinking in terms of being in or out right now. They're thinking in terms of testing waters, trying to put a foot in a couple of different places. Not that there isn't a willingness to move in a direction, but there's a sense that it doesn't have to be black or white, one or the other. And so when you can think that way and you realize, like, hey, people are willing to engage, willing to even try on the clothing, if you will.
Right.
And that's different. And so, like you just described, the chance of getting somebody to drop all of their old thoughts right now and move over here is low. The chance of having somebody say, well, I'm willing to show up to church and enter into a study, I'd like to learn, is high.
Yes.
That's an opportunity if you can see it that way. If you're too much of a gatekeeper where you can't leave space for that and allow people to be in different spaces and probably not in full agreement with you, you probably won't enjoy that process. But if you can leave space for people to be open to consideration, there's a lot of people that are up for that. That John Vervaeke podcast that I sent to you, which we could link if you wanted, was discussing kind of the flip side of this. But I also think on the other side of the whole deconstruction idea, which is very postmodern language, if you will.
Yeah.
But they had basically, here was a young guy who grew up in a pretty strict form of Christianity, who then rejected it, right? Deconstructed. But then he came back around to realizing that was really formative to him, really valuable to him. And now he's really kind of going back in and even taking back on practices that are related to Jesus.
Right.
And he is a philosophical...
Yeah, it's extremely heady.
It's very heady, but what he's trying to do is construct a both and, metamodern Christianity. Okay. However you feel about that, you could call that syncretism. You could call it a lot of things. But at the end of the day, here's somebody who walked away, who realized there were really valuable things there, and they're wading back into some of it.
Sure.
I think the more thoughtful Christian thinkers would say, guess what? Actually, I've been listening to Charlie Peacock's Music and Meaning a lot lately. That's a show I've really been enjoying, and he's talking about the people engaging in the top 40. So he was talking about Jelly Roll and one of his new songs, but he made a good point. He said sometimes when you publicly and practically start opening the door to Jesus and talking to Jesus, sometimes you'll find that there he is. Mm-hmm. And you might actually encounter some life change. It kind of reminds me of the days when Jesus was here. Imagine some people who were like, I'm going to go hear what he has to say. And you end up meeting someone who changes you. So I would encourage people to be open to that.
Well, I mean, you can even just see that example in MIA's story where she was deep into Hinduism and Jesus appears to her, and now she's a Christian.
Right.
Talking about somebody that has lots of really popular songs. So there's like you open yourself to that. Here's my thing in that particular podcast you sent me from Vervaeke is that there was a conversation that I struggle with in this world of the metamodern and the what we would call the critique, the critical critique of Scripture, and here it is. It's their ignorance, the people that so Vervaeke and the guy of actual what kind of scholarship and what kind of critique is already going on in the Christian world. They think in some ways it's light.
Yeah.
And they don't understand. And so it kind of shows in their conversation in particular about John 4 and the woman caught in adultery. Yeah. They actually themselves don't fully understand what the Orthodox Church understands about how that, and historically how that passage has been used. There's a lot of ignorance in their critique of things.
Yeah.
So, and so
I mean, I don't know squat about it, but right. Is that possible? Meaning, I don't know what they don't know.
Right. Yeah. I get it. But for me, what happens is when I listen to these podcasts, I'm like, wait, you haven't read this or you don't know exactly what's going on. But the other thing is like the talking about how we create meaning. And so we take something that we don't believe is maybe true and we make it true in our larger story. And I'm just like, well, no. That part I'm not gonna. That just seems like early. This is what the neo-Orthodox were fighting against.
Yeah,
long time ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So just in case that's unclear, I'm interested in what Vervaeke's talking about in that podcast and other places because of the ways that people are showing their continued intrigue in the Christian faith.
Yes,
I'm not suggesting. I'm not taking on the labels that those guys are suggesting.
Right.
I'm still solidly a Christian.
Well, no, I know.
And I'm not really personally on the hunt for a new way of doing that. Do I have things to learn from those people? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so I'm not going, oh, here's the way. I'm saying I'm interested in people who are outside the church who can't stop talking about Jesus.
Yeah, no,
that's what's interesting to me.
Interesting to me too. Yeah, he's a compelling figure who keeps inserting himself.
Yeah. As well as a number of other people, and the popularity of that stuff at this point is really interesting. Yeah.
So I think I present this from the pulpit a lot. Though for me, when meaning making comes, when you're going to make meaning, the only place that meaning comes is in Jesus on the cross and in the empty tomb. Because without the cross and the empty tomb, meaning making from Christianity is really pointless. And Paul asserts this in 1 Corinthians 15 very clearly. So that's where I always want to come back to, because if you want meaning to your suffering, if you want meaning to your life, this is the only space. It's through the cross and out the empty tomb. Like the hope of the resurrection is it. That's what gives the depth of pain and suffering in my life and others meaning and hope. So
and it's what makes Jesus a actually compelling figure.
Yes.
If that otherwise. He's a long list. There's a long list of sages and
I always tell people, and people get really upset at me. I'm like, Jesus is not a good teacher, and people get mad at me. I'm like, well, he isn't. He's a bad teacher. If his two things, like that he's God and that he can die for your sins and pay the price and conquer death, like those 3 points. Like if those aren't true, his teachings. I mean, okay, if you really want to work hard, you can gain a few interesting things, but. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, it doesn't. It's all caught up in the fact that Jesus is God.
Yeah.
Not this is how to live the good life.
Yeah. Well, it's devastating in a way if there's not hope on the other end of it. It's like, well, you were missing the point, and you forever will, and you'll never be good enough. Would be one way to read that. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Which is very metamodern of me.
Yeah.
I can listen to that. I agree with you. Yeah. I'm a Christian that listens to John Vervaeke every once in a while when I'm up for it. But then again, Justin Timberlake got a DUI.
Right. That's more important.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's more intriguing because I'm like, why? I know we're switching, but why is somebody who makes so much money not have a driver?
Well, because he's still an individual, Eric. He likes to be in the driver's seat.
I understand that. He's very modern. It's called
I continue to think this is a good idea, and I'm looking for funding if anybody's interested. I'd like to start a magazine about the rest of us.
The rest of us.
Yeah, like what's going on with me. I was thinking about how Justin might be kind of curious about what I've been up to.
You've promoted this once at least the other time on the Faith Over Breakfast podcast.
Of course, and this is really the big thing. And
big glossy photos, ads from
yeah.
And
for instance, let's see. I'm trying to think about something really.
Well, it could just be why Andy sat on his couch yesterday with his wife.
Yeah,
and then you can have a little square of your wife up there. Does she really like sitting with Andy?
Well, the drama of the guy out in front of the taco place that ran out of gas after backing out of his parking spot and was just sitting in the middle, and the hero's journey of me, having the tool he needed to push open the little flap to get the gas in, and the incredible drama that played out there, right on Craycroft Ave.
Yeah.
And I think Justin would get a lot out of it. I'm paying attention to his life. I'd like him to pay a little attention to mine.
Do you think we should only market it to celebrities?
Yes, that's my whole point.
Right,
only to because that's what they're missing in life.
Right.
They don't have what we have. We have their lives to entertain us.
Right.
They don't have ours.
So what we need is to invest most of our money in a net worth analyzer, so that if your net worth drops, you don't get our magazine anymore.
No, there's a certain threshold in which we are not for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Sounds good.
But we'll need one of them. Maybe one of them will support it. That's where we get some of our income.
Well, yeah, they got to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the deal.
We're going to market it to them.
We've got to have it somehow. I'd like little newsstands just in front of their homes where when they woke up in the morning, they went, oh my gosh.
You know what? A fleet of trucks.
A fleet of trucks.
Called the mobile newspaper stand.
The mobile minority.
They just pull up right in front of the celebrities' houses.
Yeah.
And just sit there for a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I mean, I think that would really enrich Justin's life. He could get his mind off his DUI. He probably would stop drinking if he had something to occupy him.
Do you know, I think Faith Over Breakfast is some of the best podcasting out there.
I know, it's really incredible.
So great.
Yeah, good. Well,
I really love this idea, man. I wish that I, had the kind of money to back something like that. Would just be for the humor of it all.
The trouble is, if we had so much money, we'd be one of them.
Yeah, we have to have secret money.
Yeah, secret money. That's that's a niche. There's those people with the secret money, and there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them.
And nobody knows.
Nobody knows. They drive their Ford
Fusion
trucks.
Oh yeah. I don't even think they're. Yeah, I think some of them are in just good old Toyota Corollas.
Yeah, little Toyota Corollas with duct tape.
Yep, sitting on millions,
billions. So highlights. We're gonna talk about abortion. We're gonna talk about the debate next time.
Yeah,
I'll bone up on I will watch the debate.
Yeah, you got a little time. I won't be here next Friday. So
you won't be here next time.
Nope.
We should just have another podcast right now.
There you go. No, it's okay. It'll give you time. There'll be something else that'll have happened by then.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., so I'll give you a report.
What are you doing in Washington, D.C.?
From the Capitol.
Why are you in Washington, D.C.?
Because I want to.
You on a vacation?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to we're doing a college visit in Michigan, but
Wait,
we're
you're not going to
stop
be there,
into
so I'm
DC.
going to preach at your church and you won't be there?
I'll be there.
Oh, okay.
I'll be back.
Oh, okay.
This is a brief thing. This is the family checks out the Washington D.C. before it gets too wild over there, and, and then we get home real quick.
All right.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll give you a report from the Capitol.
A report from the Capitol.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to Faith Over Breakfast. A couple of ways that you can support us. One is if you think the Metamodern conversation was just silly, then send us a little text saying, that was silly. Yeah. If you didn't think it was silly and you're like, man, they shouldn't have to pay to host this thing, I really love it.
And if you can't really decide if it was silly or not, you're probably a metamodern thinker.
Yeah, and then you really want to support us to $3, $5, or $10. And hey, by the way, just so you know, I support the show.
Wow, Eric.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of the show.
You just broke the third wall.
I did. I support my own show, which we could do a whole episode on that. But anyway, we'd love it if you would do that. And send us an email. Sending us a text is the easiest way. And it doesn't cost you anything.
I don't want anybody to text me, but as long as they're texting you, it's fine.
It doesn't. It just goes straight to our little thing, so we don't even have to have the text.
Even better.
Yeah, so we just look at our dashboard for our podcast, and there you are. So it's really helpful, and we will acknowledge you on the show. So anyway, or faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com if you really want to send a long thing.
Yeah, or you can mail us.
P.O. Box 30790, Tucson, Arizona, 85751.
Yeah.
There you
go.
All right.
Cool.
All right. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.